I'm here today with Tim Muldoon and Mack McCarter, authors of a new book titled How Do We Make the World Neighborhood by Neighborhood. Mack McCarter is the founder and coordinator of Community Renewal International. Before returning in 1994 to his native Shreveport to implement this vision, Mack pastored churches in Texas for 18 years. There are now more than 50,000 We Care team members in every state and 41 nations. 10 cities in the United States are reproducing the Shreveport model of connecting caring people, changing lives, and transforming communities. Mack and his wife, Judy, live in Shreveport and Washington, D.C. Tim Muldoon teaches in the philosophy department at Boston College and is the author or co-author of 10 books, including The Ignatian Workout and with his wife, Sue, The Discerning Parent. His books and essays are used frequently in college courses, faculty discussion groups, and retreats. He and Sue reside outside of Boston. And if you want to learn about these guys and their new book, go to orbisbooks.com. So welcome, gentlemen, and congratulations on all of your wonderful work.
Thank you, Brian.
Brian. Great to be here.
So to get started, maybe each of you can just share us a little bit more about your backgrounds than I kind of briefly touched on.
Matt, you go first. You're the
right.
genius here.
All right. And, I was born and reared here in Shreveport, Louisiana in 1945 and grew up in a radically segregated community. And even the NAACP had been outlawed by city ordinance here. So when I say radically segregated, it was a tough place to grow up if you are an African American. And so consequently, the wonderful thing and gift that I was given in my life was that my mom and dad, who moved here in 1945 from Texas, actually understood our Christian faith. And they instilled deeply within me that every single human being was precious and to be treasured. And so it was that plumb line from the get-go that literally gave me life. And when you have that plumb line of love and of seeking the good of others in your life, then you also then begin to notice, and especially here in Shreveport, vast incursions as to the rightness of that line in terms of social justice. And so even from a little boy, it wasn't my goodness, it was the plumb line of God's kingdom placed within me that enabled that to happen. And so that was always very, very much, I mean, I was still a male child with all of the foibles that you could have and all the ups and downs. So I don't want to present anything that looks just sparkling goodness, because it ain't there. But the great thing is that the desire for a world in which we are one was planted and nurtured in my life in the midst of this place that was a little bit barren, of loving kindness for one another. And so at the age of 16, I was called to serve that kingdom. And the only paradigm that I had, of course, was the institutional church. And so I went to college and seminary and went into the ministry full time. And my last year in seminary, I really felt called to come back to Shreveport and to do what I'm doing now in terms of healing the divides. And giving my life to do that. But I had no paradigm, for that kind of work. I know there were many paradigms, but I didn't have them. And so I went ahead and went in and began to pastor local congregations. And then in 1981, my mentor was a great Quaker philosopher named D. Elton Trueblood, who was a great hero. And Dr. Trueblood, he was the author of 33 books, and he was an incredible guy. He sent me Arnold Toynbee's 12-volume work on a study of history. And in the third volume, on October the 27th, 1981, I read the words that he had hoped I would read, that society is a system of relationships. And when I read those words, I stood straight up and I went, my gosh, if that's true, then this world can be healed. Because as a pastor, I knew that relationships had rules that were just as ineluctable as the laws of gravity. And if we obeyed those relationship rules, then we would grow together. And if we disobeyed them, then of course we would end up in dysfunction. And so it was seeking practical ways to apply to whole societies what I had been doing in pastoral counseling. The rules of how to come together, how to forgive, how to grow together to become one, and watching amazing brokenness being healed by trebly amazing love. And so consequently, in seeing that, I went, wow, if the basis of society is indeed relationships, and I've added positive relationships, then we have to find a way to find practical application of the rules of relationship to whole cities, whole societies. So consequently, I came back to Shreveport in 1991 now to think through a paradigm that can bring together what appeared to be 300,000 different types of uniqueness and separateness, and how do we come together as one? And that is, what do we share in common? And it's the capacity to care for one another. So community renewal is really the ongoing, applicable methodology to bring together folks in that commonality while celebrating and enhancing our own uniqueness together. So that's kind of the general story.
Wow. Well, we'll talk more about CRI in a minute. But that's an amazing story. Tim, how about you? Tell folks a little bit, if you could, about your background.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted Max to go first because it allows me to say, so that's why I was attracted to it. I mean, that's the quick answer, is that it's such a compelling story. But my own backstory is I'm trained as a systematic theologian. I've been teaching for 25 years. I had a classic academic track. So, in many ways, Mac's story is very different from mine. I just thought of myself as somebody trying to leverage my own learning and my own encounter with the philosophical and theological traditions of the West for thinking positively about how to live well in the contemporary world that we live in. I started teaching theology in 1997, and very quickly I was moving away from kind of, what is kind of caricatured as the ivory tower, but the idea that, theologians are just kind of thinking thoughts that don't have much connection to the real world. And very quickly, I was learning that my students were asking very different questions. They were asking questions about just how to have a life. This was in rural Pennsylvania. I taught at a small college called Mount Aloysius, small mercy institution. It served families that had been affected by the economic changes of the 70s, 80s, 90s in especially coal and steel. And so we're talking second career folks. I had non-traditional students who had been truck drivers. I had people that were, starting from scratch, trying to rebuild their lives. And so, theology for them and philosophy, these were just abstractions that maybe didn't have a whole lot of relevance. And so what really, I think, was the first fire that was lit in my heart was the question, how does this tradition and how does, this vast learning that I had been exposed to throughout my undergraduate and graduate years, how does it speak to just the ordinary desires of men and women and children to just have a good life, to live in community, to build relationships, to to have good lives. And so my earliest writing was in spirituality, which I saw as the way to kind of answer the desires of the human heart. But pretty quickly something happened that actually I found appalling, which was that when I wrote my first and second books, they were described as self-help books. And I was just appalled by that. I mean, I never thought of theology or philosophy as self-help, let alone spirituality. Without getting too much into the weeds, this was during the period of the early 2000s. Spirituality was the juggernaut in the publishing industry that, just was, nobody expected this. But it was understood as this kind of self-help thing. And I was appalled by that idea, because it struck me as, trying to get to something that's deep and true and, the most authentic part of ourselves, the part that loves, the part that desires, the part that suffers, the part that seeks meaning. And so I was just really struck by how reductionist that approach was. And so, from there, I think there was this kind of yearning to ask the question, well, how do I then connect this to something that's just more in people's lives and about connecting people? So I think of that as almost like, this was the radar that I was putting out there, and really kind of asking God, what do I do about this? Fast forward years later, I got involved with a charity organization that does amazing work in small Catholic communities around the country, especially in poor areas. It's called Catholic Extension. I eventually went to work for them for 3 years. I left academia, and I think just because there was this desire to really get back to something about, what's really happening in people's lives. And Catholic Extension, I think, has the great wisdom of recognizing that it is not always the case that the great advances and the great, stories that are to be told are happening on Wall Street or Madison Avenue, or in my case, on a campus like Boston College. They're happening in small towns, villages, areas that are kind of, I think, wrongly described as flyover country. And in this work, I really recognized what kind of heroism there was out there. And it just gave me this kind of appetite for, where were the stories of amazing things happen. So I met just an, incredible number of great human beings. Fast forward again, Mack's organization was nominated for its annual award in 2019. And so I went to investigate it, brought a team there. And within about 2 minutes of Mack starting to speak, I said, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. There is something else going on here. And I was just absolutely fascinated. Community Renewal, his organization, won what's called the Lumen Christi Award from Catholic Extension. This was a national recognition of making a difference in faith communities and social change. A year later, I just emailed him out of the blue and I said, this is just an amazing story, Mack. Somebody's got to write the book about this, because if nobody else is doing it, I'll do it. I was so taken by this story. And that was the beginning of my engagement with Mack and then with Community Renewal, and really just wanting to tell this story. And I'll just mention one last thing before throwing it back to you, Brian. One of the kind of mottos that had been abroad in Catholic Extension during my years there was the words that you find in the gospel. What good can come out of Nazareth? This kind of, oh my gosh, what, nothing happens in Nazareth. And there's going to be an attitude, I think, of some people, like, nothing good happens in Shreveport. This I can say now because I love Mack. I love the folks that are there. I've been back many times. But, I live in Boston, and I live, and I teach at Boston College, so I live in this world, that I think very often can fall into a kind of elitism, maybe without not even, wanting to, but the sense that, if it's not front page news, in the Washington Post and the LA Times, New York Times, then it can't be that important. And what we're saying is, and certainly from my experience, what we're saying is there are amazing things that happen in communities that are in this, roughly named flyover country. But what's happening in Shreveport, I'm saying, is unparalleled. And I've, been in a lot of parts of the country at this point. And there's nothing like this happening elsewhere. So I really wanted to help give this a megaphone. And I'll just say, I'm not just an author. Now I've really become part of really wanting to tell the community renewal story and help others to understand and get on board.
Well, this is such a great fit because, I mean, the whole purpose of How to Heal Our Divides is to build awareness on all these organizations like CRI that are typically under the radar, that just so many people just don't know about. And so, I mean, Mac, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what CRI's mission is and what its model is and why it works.
Oh, yeah, I'll be more than happy to do that, Brian. And so, when I arrived back in Shreveport, I actually was led to join an African American church, and that was not of my doing. I just went to visit. I wanted to catch up on the civil rights history of the struggle for civil rights in Shreveport. And I read about the pastor who had been one of the heroes in the civil rights movement in Shreveport, Louisiana. So I went to hear him preach. And at that particular point, following his sermon, and they are singing what we call the invitation hymn, and they say the doors of the church are open. Come forward. And at that particular point, God very clearly said to me, join this church. And I was one white face in the midst of 1,000 other faces. And I very clearly said, no, and I began to give reasons why they might think I'm a spy. My wife is not here with me. I am, I'm all my old friends here in Shreveport. I just moved back. They're going to think, well, there goes McCarter. But God said, well, you don't have faith. And I remember saying, well, that's a low blow, God. This was all during the hymn, Just As I Am. And so, no one more reluctantly went forward and joined a church. And yet that was an incredible unfolding experience of love. And I have to say, Brian, the scripture says the wolf and the lamb shall lie down together. Well, my race has been the wolf to the African-American race and those of color. And it doesn't ask anything of the wolf to lie down except change your appetite. But it asks everything of the lamb. And to watch that trust and stuff of one who was representative of a race that was wolf-like to them was an amazing gift and change in my life. And so consequently, from that was the beginning and it wasn't, quote, in my plan, but to go and to do that. And my wife followed. She was also placed in the congregation the same way I was. And I didn't know she was going to join. And so she joined, and together it was that when folks put their arms around us that literally ushered us into a way to be bridges of love. And it was, but again, I was reluctantly obedient. I have to really share that, and it wasn't part of the plan. So following that experience, I had the experience of, I had preached about love, and I really hammered our folks in the pew. We've got to get out of the seats and go to the streets. And they enjoyed it as much as I did, but I didn't know how to tell them, they would depart to the world or, go forth. And I never figured out where forth was, because every Sunday they'd come back and nothing in the world had changed, and we'd hammer away. We got to do this. And so I did not have the foggiest idea how to do that. And just, this was the heart of community renewal, is that Shreveport had changed, and a lot of drugs, et cetera, a lot of drive-by shootings. And so I determined that I was going to see if love worked. I had preached about it for 18 years. I had devoted my life to the kingdom of love, which is the kingdom of God, and didn't really know if indeed it really worked. And so consequently, one of the toughest streets, Lawrence Street, I said, can I get to be friends with folks? I'm a different color. I'm a different socioeconomic level than the folks that live on Lawrence Street. I'm a stranger to them, and I'm scared to death. So here are 4 massive obstacles. And on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, I drove down to Lawrence Street in March of 1991, and with the idea of stopping and beginning to make friends. And I have to tell you, I was scared to death. I got on Lawrence Street and I thought, well, I'll just do a drive-by blessing. Bless you, bless you, bless you, and go on. But God had other designs, and I pulled over, opened the car door, and all these kids came running up in front of all of these, what we call shotgun houses. They're like row houses, very impoverished area. And they came running up, and I grabbed them up in my arms and began to knock on doors, saying, not many doors open, but when one did, I'm Mack McCarter, and there's a group of us believe if we get to be friends, we can heal this city. And so I went back every single Saturday at 10 o'clock. And within 3 months, and this is true, the folks were sitting on their front porches waiting just to sit up and talk and to be friends. And I stayed down there for 3 years. And it didn't change my theology, but it changed my methodology quite radically. And it was absolutely the gift of their friendship was profound. And then I began to see that love actually overcame the difference in color, that it actually overcame the difference in economics. It overcame being a stranger, and it overcame fear. And so consequently, it was there that we said, if that can happen with someone going to a different block, we need to have a model, because you have to take a city back block by block. We need a model that can take care of an entire city of 300,000 effectively. And so why go to someone else's block when you can go to your own? And that was, I set out and had a 2-day long retreat with myself. And I wanted to break up with myself several times because I wasn't real good company on how we do this. And let me just give 3 things very quickly. But that relational part, we cannot skip over. When I of course, I'm in a hurry to get to, quote, the model itself. But unless we understand on an atomistic level or a molecular level that it is precisely there, and we're good at that, that begins everything. You just can't skip over people in order to get to the program. The process itself, it becomes the product. And that is, our mission is, of course, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth just like it is in heaven. And we are never let go of the imperative of that claim on our lives. I don't know any other reason to live than to do that. And so our mission is to make our world a home where every single child, no matter their age, I had to say that so I could get myself included, can be safe and be loved. And so consequently, that's the mission. Then the question is, how do we do that? And we're going to build a model that literally then can be the expanding wineskins for the new wine of love. And so I sat down and I thought, and the immediate thing that came to me in that personal retreat was in contemplating, how do we take these rules of relationships and make them practically applicable for whole cities was the image of a swimming pool and how we can clean and make healthy an unhealthy pool. And you have to know what cleans one molecule of H2O. You can't get the pool clean. You can't skip over people. And so you come together, that molecule, and we've got that down really good, even in psychology, et cetera. But all of our nonprofits have jumped in the pool. We're madly cleaning molecules. We can show how successful we are. Last year, we had 50 baptisms. This year, 100 baptisms. But the pool isn't getting clean. You know, we still have massive dysfunction that's going on. So somebody a lot smarter than me invented what we call a swimming pool filter. And it was that technology that could bring in billions of molecules. You still have to know what cleans one molecule, but if that's all you know, you can't get the pool clean. And so you can also have a system that really looks great, but if it's not cleaning molecules, you know, it's like a vacuum cleaner. If you ever had a vacuum cleaner that doesn't pick up anything, it really looks great and sounds great, but you're running back and forth over cat hair and never getting it up. And so consequently, how do we develop a system that can literally do that? And then you have to be able to show the sequence that does cleanse the molecules, but sends them out with such velocity and with such volume that literally we know that we can now have the technology to clean pools. We can do it. And so consequently, it's just a matter then of ratios. So we have three things that we're doing. We put those in place, we turn on the switch, and then this process begins. And so we actually call it a social technology because we can now take dirty pools and not only clean them to the place that we can swim, we can clean them to the place we can drink the water, and even more of the technology there. So consequently, we have three things. One is you've got to start with the individual. Will you commit your life to care for all others? And we're not changing people, Brian. We're actually making them visible, because the reality of the human race is they're already caring. I don't know anyone who won't do a caring act, for someone. We're already caring. We all have the capacity to care. That was a huge realization. Is Tim mentioned flyover country, where you can get, some knucklehead gets on a plane in LA and then acts the fool, over Las Vegas in the plane, and they duct tape him to his seat and land in Denver, and arrest him. And he makes news. And he has flown over millions of people who are taking cookies to new neighbors, who are, looking out for little children who are serving. We don't make the news because we're normal. We're the biggest gang in town. And the key is, how do we make caring folks visible to one another? So we did something just knucklehead-like, real simple. We started the We Care team. And folks were already caring. We said, let's just make them visible. We're going to take what is already real, it's already there, and make it visible. And you sign a card. You tell one thing you're already doing to help another person. And give us your name and address. We're going to give you a pin to wear. We're going to put a bumper sticker on your car. I had a great friend, Millard Fuller, who started Habitat for Humanity, and Millard loved community renewal. Millard came down. He was like a Baptist preacher. We lost him in 2009. He was a great guy. And he would say in Shreveport, which is the buckle of the Bible Belt, if your car doesn't have a We Care bumper sticker, your car is living in sin. And we've got to have saved cars. Well, man, that was like saying sick 'em to a dog here in Shreveport. Man, we got to have saved cars. And then we have not only bumper stickers, we have we care signs and put them in front of houses. And you would be astonished to drive around Shreveport in, quote, the highest crime areas. Here are we care signs all over the place because we're the biggest gang in town, but we are disconnected from one another. And so consequently, the three things to reconnect is you make a commitment. I will commit my life to care for each and every single human being. But another commitment, I will join together with others who have made their life commitment to care for every single human being, because we have been caring in isolation from one another. And the power of then coming together in a caring family or a caring army is unbelievable. That's the first thing. The second is block by block. We call that our Haven House deal. And we're going to train people to go to the people who live on their block and make friends. When I grew up in Shreveport, I knew everybody that lived on my street. They all knew me, and I bet you $10 to $1 that when you grew up, it was the same. You knew everybody that lived around you. They all knew you. And so consequently, we were connected together. And now we can email people all over the world, and we don't know who's living and dying 5 houses down from us. We have gotten disconnected. And so we must reconnect based on our neighborly joy with one another. So we train people in a 1-hour training session to become what we call a Haven House leader. And they have a special sign that says "We Care" with HH on it. And they go to meet their neighbors and help their neighbors get to know one another. Well, how? Well, we have a million ways, but the best, of course, is throw a party and ask folks to come over and get to know one another. But the key is you've now systematized a great power. You put it in a system. And then I always say, when you turn on a light, it's wonderful. A dark room becomes light, but the photons are diffuse. But somebody has found a way to move through a prism and line up those photons, and you make a laser. And by making caring intentional, you now have a profound way. And then the third part of this model is, how do we help our brothers and sisters trapped in high crime, high poverty areas? And the very best way to do that, I love the fact that we send missionaries abroad, but we have to train and equip and send lovers of people to actually move into the highest crime neighborhoods, to live with their families and begin to leaven, using the We Care team and the Haven House deal, begin to leaven entire neighborhoods. So we call that our friendship house. We build houses that are like community centers disguised as houses. They have a big room in there for the whole community. And right now we're at a place where we can go in a 40 square block area, literally what we call revillagize that area. And that's where we have an incredible metric that the Shreveport Police Department came and found, they've done a 20-year longitudinal study. And this is going to blow your mind. And it still blows my mind. They did it without our knowledge. And then they reported it to us, is that in our Friendship House neighborhoods, all crime has fallen an average of 50. Well, all crime had fallen an average of 51%, but major crime has fallen over 54%. And in some areas, as much as 70%. And those are not our statistics. It is astonishing to see. So those three things together, the We Care team, that's the individual commitment, joining together the molecular part of that, and now we're part of an army. Then the Haven House leaders, we've got over 5,000 that we have trained in Haven House leaders. No, I'm sorry. It's 1,500. Our goal is 5,000. 1,600 we've trained and dispersed those. So we have about 70,000 people in a caring system in Shreveport. And then our Friendship House areas, we've got, we're building our 11th Friendship House now. And our folks move in, remarkable human beings, Brian. And so that's where we are. That's kind of the model. And I'm sorry to take so long. It takes a little time. I have to have, if it's an elevator speech, I've got to have the Sears Tower, man.
Nothing.
It's in the book. Let's just put it. It's all in the book.
Good,
so
good. Well, I mean, anything that's that of an intractable problem, right? I mean, that's how a lot of people would view this, without being familiar with it, is that, it's just something that is so complex and so challenging that, to be able to devise, a solution, so to speak, can't be just a straightforward one-liner.
Right. Yeah, and Brian, just to put this in some perspective, the original neighborhood in which the first Friendship House was planted had something like 2 homicides a week, before any of this had ever happened back in the 80s. CBS Sunday Morning did a story about community renewal and focused on just what kind of a transformation we're talking about. So we're really talking about an entire remaking of that neighborhood. And obviously that's related to the title of the book. So we're really talking about a story of remarkable transformation. Obviously there are some intermediate steps. And again, we talk about it in the book, but this is a wholesale transformation that's beginning at the relational level. And to me, that was really the genius that captured my attention when I was first doing that due diligence of community renewal back in 2019, is that it wasn't just another program, because we've all heard of programs, government programs, social work programs, et cetera. Programs are fine, and some of them work better than others. But what Mac was really intuiting was that unless you understand what's happening at the most basic level, it's not going to work. And the most basic level is one human being reaching out to another human being. And so if you understand the dynamics of relationship, then that image of that pool filter analogy starts to really make sense, and it's what gives us some confidence to say, look, it happened in Allendale, which was the name of that first neighborhood, and it's happened since in other neighborhoods of Cedar Grove and now the latest one in the MLK neighborhood in Shreveport. So it's happened multiple times in this context. And so we can start to see then how that same model then can be transplanted into other contexts, and we're starting to see that now in these replication sites in other places. So we're just very excited about how this will work elsewhere.
And that's exactly right, Tim. And the great thing is people say, well, it's working in Shreveport, but that's the South. Does it work everywhere? Well, the key is what do folks, as human beings, we all need love. And we all need to love one another. That's how we're wired. And we just finished building the International House of Friendships in Western Cameroon. We have folks coming from the villages of Cameroon to Shreveport saying we never dreamed that we could come to Shreveport, Louisiana and learn things we need to learn about village life and take it back. Because we're all human beings, and that's the great thing that we share in common, and all we have to do is to adjust methodology, but the fundamentals are all there. And I might add the fact that that this not only can travel in that way, it has a profound effect on all of our lives, because we have seen our richest neighborhoods now partner with our most impoverished neighborhoods through what we call purposeful friendship, because we're all there with the same purpose. And we can now recognize one another We can celebrate our differences, of course. But when we see We Care pins or We Care stickers, we immediately feel one. And this is going to blow your mind, because when I moved to Shreveport, I felt like our largest problem was, how do we bring together blacks and whites in Shreveport, Louisiana? Well, shoot, man, that has been eclipsed by, how do we bring together Republicans and Democrats? And this is absolutely true. As Jerry Clower used to say, if I'm lying, I'm dying. And this is absolutely true. We have Republicans and Democrats who I know would give their lives for one another. Now, they still have their convictions of their political persuasion, but they are joined together in one common cause to care for one another. And that is
exactly what we need more of.
Absolutely.
That's it. Yeah. So, and just to, amplify this point that Mac's making, part of my own intuition about this early on was, we've become, and this is not at all news, but we've become so individualized, I can, talk about any number of studies that demonstrate how much of an individualized society we've become. One theorist who's written about this very eloquently is Robert Putnam, with whom Mac shared the stage when they were named Citizens of the Year. Because Mac is seeing this in the context of community renewal, how it is healing that tendency to pull apart from one another. That we have to, in some sense, come back together precisely because that's what answers the deepest desire of the human heart. So again, getting that right on the most basic level is what ultimately yields the confidence to say it's not just a Republican problem or a Democrat problem. It's not just a racial problem. It is a fundamental human problem that all of us in the United States are facing. But if we get it right, yes, it is going to create friendships that cross the racial divide. Yes, it is going to create friendships that transform the political acrimony that's tearing our country apart. Yes, it's going to remake neighborhoods and create, oases where children can thrive, where adults can thrive, and ultimately where we're just increasing the quality of our lives as citizens.
So, how many friendship houses are there in Shreveport then, roughly?
We're building our 11th friendship house, and in our areas, we always build 2 friendship houses in a 40 square block area, and we begin to win trust by serving, and we begin by serving the most precious possessions of the neighborhood, the children and the youth. So we open the doors in one for after school, for K-5 through 5th grade, and then in the other for the youth, middle school and high school, every day after school. And that begins to build the trust of the parents, et cetera. And then we move to the We Care team membership, and then training block leaders, and continuing we call them, our folks that move in, we call them community coordinators. And they are there to give caring, but they're there also to be coordinators of caring, enabling neighbor to reach neighbor. And it's natural. It's who we are as human beings. It's how we've been made as human beings. I have to say this, that Samuel Johnson, that great man of letters, actually the second most quoted man of letters in the English language outside of Shakespeare. I don't know how that happens, but I read that. And Samuel Johnson, when he was 16, his uncle Cornelius, who was all of 26, told him, "Samuel, most intelligent people study the leaves and the limbs of a tree all their life. You grab the trunk and you can shake all of the leaves and all of the limbs at once." Well, that really is what I've discovered. The trunk of all of the what appears to be a Rubik's Cube of solutions that hasn't really done trunk grabbing. It gets right to the place of let us come together, in loving relationships nourished by those who've been set free to kind of be the physicians of relationships and of souls, and just continue to nourish that. We need a group of full-time nourishers, using the model, and then begin to go on. And we don't claim to have everything. When I'm so old, Brian, when I took chemistry, the atom only had 3 parts: the proton, electron, and neutron. That was it. Well, that's true, but it wasn't the whole truth. And right now we're kind of at the electron, proton, and neutron. That's true, but it isn't the whole truth. We need everybody to add to this so that ultimately it might be 10,000 years to go, but ultimately the human race will become immune to hatred. It will become immune to all of the things that would separate us and divide us. And it will be living in an empathy of love for one another that we could barely recognize simply as kind of pilot lights within this each of our lives that can become a furnace. Well, I've started preaching. I can't help it.
So how far has this gone outside of Shreveport? Now, I shouldn't say how far, but how broadly? Are there friendship houses in other communities?
Yes.
Okay. So what other cities in the United States?
Yeah. We actually, the model has actually been fully reproduced in a county seat town, Shawnee, Oklahoma, where they are right next to the largest reservation for Native Americans. Their county line abuts the reservation, and they now have built their second friendship house, and it was actually built by the Shawnee tribe. They were the ones, and there had been conflict, as you could well imagine, forever and ever. They came in and they built the second friendship house, and so we had that, and they were friendship houses in Abilene, Texas, and then we're at various stages moving into that. Actually, we had mentioned 11 places, but it's now up to 20 of folks that said we want to bring aboard the model, and it's kind of a slow pull. And then we have friendship houses actually in southern Nigeria and in western Cameroon. So and that it's just a wonder to see. So we're still very much, kind of like that first well that Edwin Drake drilled in Titusville, Pennsylvania. We've got it going, and it's working. Now we need everybody to jump in and help make it better.
Well, it's just an amazing story. And I really appreciate you guys putting it into the form of a book, because, at least personally, I wouldn't have known about it without, having learned about the book through Orbis. And, which is a shame. It's exactly what you said. We see the wrong things on the evening news. And, we need to have a different kind of a news network, I think, but that's a whole other story. But we need to be able to learn, and spread the word about all these kinds of good things that are happening that just get underappreciated. So
I mentioned the CBS Sunday Morning video, and I'll just mention one quick story that obviously also, put out the reach of what Community Renewal has been doing. And one immediate fruit of that was related to this 11th friendship house that's being built now. It caught the attention of the CEO of Kansas City Southern Railroad, and he was just super excited about this, and they have a strong presence in Shreveport. Long story short, it's Kansas City Southern that is contributing to the building of this 11th friendship house. So, it was one way that putting the word out there yielded a relatively quick, immediate result. My sense was, we need this book because I would like more and more people to understand this and really, kind of get them excited about the capacity. Because you're right. If what we're immersed in on a daily basis are effectively stories that are anomalies, we need to be constantly reminded of what are the regular stories. Again, people caring for each other, and that genius of recognizing that we just have to keep that visible and then kind of watch the creativity that happens. So from where I sit, I don't imagine that the way that it's replicated in other places. So Mac mentioned Shawnee and of course what's happening in Cameroon, which is a fantastic story, Nigeria. But these stories are going to be different because the situations, the communities themselves are different. This is not a corporate structure where, there's going to be planting a franchise. It's going to be lighting a fire and allowing people's individual creativity to say, hey, yeah, we can care for one another, and here's how we're going to do it in our local circumstance. So that's already starting to happen. I mean, even in the early returns from this book launch, I'm already in conversation with another city that's really starting to think through what might this look like in our neighborhoods. So I'm very excited to see that process move forward.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's true. There has to be the uniformity of principle. But that uniformity of principle then enables wonderful mass customization,
Absolutely.
we might say. And so, listen, I am just right now with however many witnesses we've got, 10,000 witnesses. Brian, I'm inviting you to come to Shreveport. I'd love you to come and see. I really would.
Yeah.
That we'd have a
Let's
ball.
figure that out.
And I just think that would be great. Not trying to put you on the spot, buddy.
No, it's okay. I mean, there's several things I'd like to follow up with you guys on, we'll talk about that later.
Sure.
In the meantime, everybody go out and buy this book. Again, the title is How Do We Make the World Neighborhood by Neighborhood? And orbisbooks.com, is where you can go get it.
Tim, I have a visual aid.
Yes, thank you. Tim and Mac, thank you so much for spending the time to share this with us, and obviously to do the book. And I definitely will help you get the word out about this, and want to follow up with you on several directions. So for now, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you,
Brian.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks.